So a judge ruled that Fani Willis will be able to stay on as the prosecutor in the Georgia election fraud case against Donald Trump. However, Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade has been forced to resign. So it's kind of a good news, bad news situation. It's good news that Fani Willis is still going to be able to stay in the case and prosecute Donald Trump. It's bad news that her and Nathan Wade ended up on trial here when actually it's Donald Trump who is on trial, but this is just typical Trump and his team trying to muddy the water and make it about everybody but him. MAGA right now, though, is losing their mind at this decision. Let's take a look at what Charlie Kirk had to say. He said, even left-wing networks knew Fani Willis deserved to be removed from this case. Judge McAfee instead chose to be a coward and protect a woman he's donated to in the past. It's time for Georgia to use SB 332, which Governor Kemp signed into law just this week, and remove the rogue prosecutor in Fulton. What's so ridiculous about this is Donald Trump is the one that's on trial. And they're going after Fani Willis so hard, trying to smear her in any way they possibly can, because they know that's all they got to do to get the cult to just turn all their attention to that. There's no way that the cult could wrap their mind around the idea that maybe Donald Trump lied, that maybe Donald Trump did try to steal the election. They could never wrap their mind around any of those things. The only thought they can have is that it must be the prosecutors, it must be the judges, it must be all the system. It's all rigged against Trump. Check out what Jim Banks had to say. He said this: Judge McAfee once worked for Fani Willis and donated to her campaign. I'm not shocked that he didn't disqualify her, but as an American, I am disappointed. Fani Willis is as crooked as they come. It's impossible for Donald Trump to get a fair trial. Election interference. No, the election interference was from Donald Trump. When his own team said to him, you lost. There's no evidence. There's not enough evidence anywhere to show that you won this thing. You lost. If Donald Trump could have just been man enough to accept defeat and go home like everyone else in the history of the United States that's ever lost an election, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in today. Donald Trump wouldn't be in the mess we're in today. And honestly, if Donald Trump could have just been more of a man about the whole thing and said, you know what, the American people have spoken and I don't agree with this decision at all, and I'll come back 4 years later and I'll remind you why you guys made a mistake. Had he done that, he may actually be in a better position to win come November. But instead, he just doubled down on the rhetoric. He just continued to push the lies and then went out there and continued to demonize anyone trying to prosecute him, tried to vilify and defame anyone out there that was trying to prosecute him for the things that he done. And old Alan Dershowitz, man, he's really upset about it. Take a look at what he had to say.
That she conspired to commit perjury with Nathan Wade and with the other witness. Who are you going to believe, this judge or your lying eyes? We all know there was an actual conflict of interest here. He just doesn't have the guts to say it. And I predicted he wouldn't have the guts to say it. He has to live in Fulton County. Now, he may have said some things that are very critical of her, but still, he should have removed her from the case. There is an actual conflict of interest. She made money from this case. If any
You know, I don't think these people really realize just how ridiculous their talking points are. And irony is completely lost on these people because they want to sit and talk about, oh, look at this money Fani Willis made over here, meanwhile ignoring the grift that Donald Trump has been doing ever since he wasn't man enough to just admit defeat and take his ball and go home. Donald Trump has done nothing but grift, and he's done nothing but make a mockery out of the entire court system. And this is a guy who preaches every day how innocent he is and how rigged the system is against him. Well, if he's so innocent, why is he trying to push these court dates past Election Day? Why is he trying to wait until he gets reelected so he can pardon himself? Why is that even a conversation? If you truly were innocent and you had all the evidence that you claim you had, then the system couldn't beat you. You couldn't be defeated if you had it. If you actually had the evidence and you actually had the truth on your side. He's squirming, he's running, he's scared because he doesn't have the truth on his side. And so the only thing that he can do is try to demonize and vilify everyone out there trying to prosecute him. And he started sowing the seeds to this very early on. Back in 2020, when the election was first getting underway, he said, the only way that I could ever lose this thing is if it's rigged against me. He started saying that from the beginning. And all through his presidency, all he talked about was how mean everybody had been to him. He's even went so far as to say that they've been so mean to him that he thinks he deserves a third term if he's reelected. He should get another term because they were so unfair to him in his first term. What it is you have a spoiled brat who grew up to be a con artist in the business world, who thought that he could bring his Al Capone style of politics to Washington and rule over everybody. And then when he got there and realized, hey, there's a system in place, there's rules in place, you can't necessarily do everything you just get a wild hair to do, suddenly everyone was being mean to him. And since he ran on this idea of, we're going to drain the swamp, he went in painting everybody in Washington as evil. That way, when he got there and completely made a mockery of the system and they tried to hold him accountable for it, he could easily shift and say, see, folks, I told you they're crooked. This has all been a setup from day one. It's all been a plot from day one by Donald Trump to rule as a dictator and to have no accountability whatsoever. And he does this by making these silly comparisons and saying, if they could do this to me, they could do it to you. They're not coming for me, they're coming for you. Just classic cult leader mentality. Name one person in your life who they're coming after. Who are they coming after? And if Donald Trump was anyone else on this earth, he would have done and been under the jail. None of us would have ever got away with the things that Donald Trump has done. None of us would have ever continued to be allowed to be on social media and sit here and just make a mockery out of the system. I know people that have been involved in cases that are so minor next to these that it's laughable, that got put in jail for making one post on Facebook because they spoke when they weren't supposed to. And this guy has went out there and made an absolute mockery out of everything and tried to muddy the water so much, and it's all designed. This whole act of muddying the water is designed to make everyone look like the bad guy that's coming after him. I promise you that no one in MAGA land knew who Fani Willis was. It wouldn't have mattered if it was Fani Willis or Barney Fife. It wouldn't have made no difference who it was over there prosecuting him. They were automatically going to be the villain because it's all a big part of the Joe Biden plan. It's all part of Joe Biden's masterful plan. And meanwhile, they try to tell us that Joe Biden has dementia and don't know where he's at, but he masterminded all these big plots and he's using all these people. It wouldn't have mattered who Fani Willis was. Anybody that steps up and tries to hold Donald Trump accountable, they're going to come after him and try to demonize and vilify them. And it's an absolute shame that Nathan Wade had to resign. He should have never been on trial. Fani Willis should have never been on trial. It's Donald Trump that's on trial. And if he's innocent, prove it. If you're as innocent as you say you are and you have all the evidence you claim you have, just show it. Prove it and show it, and quit sitting here and whining and crying that the system is rigged against you. No, what happened was you went out there, you tried to rig the system in your favor. You still are. I mean, that's what he's doing with the RNC. That's what he's doing with the Republican Party now, rigging the whole thing in your favor. You tried to do that, and you realize there's a group of people who's going to hold you accountable, and that's something that's never been done in your life. Donald Trump has never been held accountable. This is all new territory to him. He is a lost ball in high weeds. He does not know where he's at. So the only thing he can do is sit here and vilify everyone else. Now, I have studied serial killers and I've studied all sorts of true crime. It's another obsession of mine. I sit and read and study that stuff all the time, and I've always been very fascinated by the Manson family. I've always been fascinated by that story. And a lot of people say, Brando, why would you be so fascinated? It's such a horrific story. Well, it is a very horrific story. But it has all the makings of a great story. It has sex, it has drugs, it has rock and roll, it has murder. I mean, it's the absolute. If you was going to make a movie, it's got all the elements that you could make. But as I've studied it over the years, I've listened to the family members of the victims that lost their lives to the Manson family, and the one thing that they always talked about so much is how that Charles Manson tried to make a mockery out of the courtroom. And how he danced and sang in the courtroom, and how he got the girls to bust into singing right in the middle of the courtroom. And when they were found guilty, they danced down the hall laughing and singing, and turned and made faces at the family members. And I used to sit and say to myself, man, what would that feel like? How awful would that be for your pregnant sister to be butchered, and then her killers looking back at you, laughing and making googly eyes at you and making faces? How terrible would that be? And whenever the victims' family members would talk about that and talk about how evil it felt to sit in the room with them and them mocking them to their faces and making a mockery of the court. I used to say to myself, man, you know, how would that feel if you were sitting there and someone was just making a complete mockery out of the court at such a serious time? And now, folks, here we are. Donald Trump is doing exactly what Charles Manson and the Manson family did in the courtroom. MAGA is doing exactly what they did. They're making a mockery. They're singing. They're dancing. They're trying to distract. You know, Charles Manson even told the girls, just act crazy. Just turn on the act. He actually told them, just turn on the act, amp it up, act as crazy as you can, and they'll just get you for insanity. That's all that'll happen. And I really feel that that's what Donald Trump and all these MAGAs like Charlie Kirk are doing. Charlie Kirk is just the Tex Watson to Trump's Charles Manson, in my opinion. And I know that may be a far stretch, and some people may say, whoa, Brando, that's pretty extreme to compare MAGA to the Manson family. But no, it's not really, because they've done exactly what the Manson family did. They've made a complete mockery out of the system and tried to convince everybody that they're innocent. But Fani Willis should have never been on trial. Donald Trump should be on trial because democracy is on the line, and he's the one that we have to always hold accountable.